The sound came first. Not words, not reason, just the sharp, splintering crash of ceramic on tile. A plate exploded against the kitchen floor, shards scattering like glass confetti across the dark linoleum. The echo clung to the walls longer than it should have, like the house itself refused to let it go. Olivia Carter froze. She had been holding her breath even before the first plate fell, but now her chest ached from the restraint. Her lips pressed tight, teeth cutting against soft skin, and when she finally inhaled, she tasted iron, blood. "It's just dishes, Michael," she screamed, her voice cracking in a way that felt older than her 29 years. "But you're breaking me, not the plates." Michael Harris loomed in the narrow kitchen, his broad frame filling the doorway like a barricade. At 31, with the confidence of a police officer used to control, he radiated authority that was less about presence and more about domination. His jaw flexed, his breath came fast, his hand gripped the rim of a coffee mug. He didn't drink from it. He didn't even look at it. He hurled it down, and the mug shattered in a violent punctuation mark. Pieces skittered across the tile, some bouncing into the sink with a metallic clink. "Esxi." Olivia flinched. The sound pressed into her skull, joining the rhythm already pounding there. Thud, thud, thud. Her heartbeat was louder than the storm outside. Somewhere between the sink and the floor, something else fell. A metallic ring struck porcelain, rolled once, twice, and then spiraled down the drain of the empty sink with a hollow, echoing note. Olivia's engagement ring, loosened from her trembling fingers, had slipped away. Clink, 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 silence. Neither of them spoke. The silence was its own violence, stretched tight across the kitchen until it snapped with his voice. "You think this is about plates?" Michael's tone was low, almost calm, which made it worse. "You think this is about soap and water?" "No, Olivia. This is about control. You can't even keep a kitchen clean." Her throat closed. "Ha!" She wanted to say 100 things about lesson plans left unfinished, about his late-night shifts, about the beach wedding invitations stacked in the living room, but the words drowned in her chest. She only shook her head. Her eyes caught the gleam of something on the wall. A brass plaque, polished smooth, read, "Harris family, forever starts here." They had hung it together after signing the lease, laughing about how corny it looked. Now it felt like a prophecy carved in metal, mocking her. She whispered, more to herself than to him. "It wasn't the dishes that broke, Michael. It was us," he scoffed, as if her words were just background noise. His hand tightened around the counter's edge until the wood creaked. For a moment, she wondered if the house itself might split in half under the weight of their silence. Olivia backed up, her bare heel crunching on a shard. The sting shot up her leg, sharp enough to remind her that pain could still be honest, unlike his words. Blood smeared against the tile in a crescent shape. She had imagined this kitchen differently. She had imagined sand-colored curtains fluttering while they planned their wedding on the beach, the smell of salt water drifting in. She had imagined Michael smiling, not sneering. She had imagined rings exchanged in vows, not one rolling into a drain. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he snapped suddenly. His eyes narrowed, suspicion cutting through his anger. "Don't you dare play the victim." Her voice came back, steadier than she expected. "I'm not playing anything. You're the one rewriting the story." He stepped closer, and the air felt heavy with his shadow. His uniform shirt, still unbuttoned at the collar from his shift, smelled faintly of smoke and sweat. Authority clung to him like a second skin. Outside, thunder rumbled. Inside, the refrigerator hummed like an indifferent spectator. She wanted to run, but she also wanted to stay. Leaving would mean surrendering to the story he would tell, that she was hysterical, unstable, unfit. Staying meant enduring the performance until someone else noticed the cracks. The ring was gone, the plates were gone, but the plaque remained. "Forever starts here." Her body shook. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried enough weight to slice the room. Forever already ended. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then came the distant wail of a police siren outside, rising, then falling, as if the world itself were mocking them with foreshadowing. The camera would have pulled back then, past the blood on the floor, past the fragments glittering like broken promises, past the plaque shining dull under fluorescent light. The courtroom was colder than Olivia expected. Not the air. The marble walls seemed to radiate a chill of their own, as if every verdict rendered here still lingered in the stone. She sat stiff-backed at the defendant's table, hands folded tightly, nails biting into her palms to keep from shaking. Her engagement ring was gone, swallowed by a drain 2 weeks earlier, but the absence still weighed heavy, like a phantom limb. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. "Case of the state versus Olivia Carter, preliminary hearing. Officer Michael Martinez, please take the stand." Michael Martinez stepped forward, his uniform crisp, his badge polished until it gleamed like a mirror. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had testified before, who knew the choreography of this stage. He raised his right hand, swore the oath, and slid into the witness chair. He didn't even glance at Olivia. His eyes locked straight ahead, as though she were just another nameless problem to neutralize. The prosecutor adjusted his tie and nodded. Officer Martinez, tell the court what you witnessed on the night of June 12th. Martinez inhaled slowly, as if preparing to deliver a monologue. And then, word for word, it came out, measured, memorized. She was hysterical. Michael tried to calm her down. She acted violent. The words hung heavy. They sounded less like truth, and more like lines recited from a play. His cadence was too perfect, pauses too deliberate. Olivia felt her throat burn. She wanted to scream, "That's not what happened." "Kuh!" But her lawyer's hand pressed against her wrist, cautioning silence. The prosecutor leaned in, encouraging. "Could you clarify what you mean by hysterical?" Martinez didn't blink. She was screaming, breaking dishes, throwing objects. Officer Harris attempted to de-escalate. She continued to escalate. Olivia bit her lip, her mouth filled with the taste of iron again. "Hysterical," Martinez repeated, slower this time. "Completely hysterical." The word seemed to echo. From the gallery, a whisper floated. "Hysterical." Another voice joined. "Hysterical." Like a contagion, it spread, quiet but present, until Olivia swore the walls themselves were murmuring. She slammed her palm against the table before she could stop herself. "That's a lie." The judge, an older man temporarily presiding over the docket, shot her a warning glance. "Ms. Carter, control yourself." Her chest rose and fell, but she forced her voice low. "Control is exactly the problem, Your Honor." The judge ignored her. He gestured for Martinez to continue. Martinez flipped through a sheet of paper, though it was clear he didn't need it. Michael Harris, my colleague, displayed remarkable patience. He asked her to put the dish down. She refused. She raised her hand as if to strike. He restrained her gently, for her own safety. Olivia's laugh was bitter, uncontainable. "Funny," she said, her tone cutting through the courtroom's hush. "You memorized the same lie twice." For the first time, Martinez's gaze flickered toward her. Not anger, not guilt, just a flash of irritation, like an actor thrown off script. "Order," the judge barked, but Olivia saw it, that crack in his performance. The prosecutor nodded solemnly. "Officer Martinez, in your professional opinion, was Ms. Haffinal opinion, was Ms. Carter a danger to herself or others?" "Yes," Martinez answered without hesitation. "Unstable, unpredictable. Classic case. The fiancée lost her mind." From the row behind him, two officers leaned toward each other. One whispered, not softly enough, "Classic case." The other nodded, repeating, "Lost her mind." Then came the chain reaction, heads nodding down the row, one after another, like a wave in a stadium. A dozen officers, all uniformed, all synchronized in silent affirmation. Their badges caught the light as they moved in unison, a metallic ripple of authority. It was cult-like, Olivia thought. Not justice, not testimony, ritual. Her face flushed hot. She clenched her fists so tight her knuckles blanched. Every instinct screamed to shout the truth, to pound the table, to beg someone, anyone, to see the lie. But she sat frozen, because every protest she had made so far had only deepened the narrative they scripted for her. Hysterical, unstable, dangerous. The prosecutor smiled faintly, as if satisfied with the performance. No further questions. The judge turned to Olivia's attorney. Cross-examination? Her lawyer rose, adjusted his glasses, and stepped forward. "Officer Martinez, you've testified that Ms. Carter was hysterical. Could you define that medically, or are you using it colloquially?" Martinez's lips curved. "It was an observable fact." "An observable fact," the lawyer repeated. "And you're certain Officer Harris's actions were entirely necessary?" "Absolutely." "Were you wearing a body camera that night?" A pause, a slight twitch in Martinez's jaw. "It malfunctioned." Several officers in the gallery shifted, the chain of nodding broken for a second. Olivia noticed. The clerk in the back noticed too, his pen scratched across paper. "Every lie here feels rehearsed." The lawyer pressed on. "Malfunctioned? Convenient. And yet your testimony is so precise, almost rehearsed." Martinez straightened. "I know what I saw." Olivia's whisper cut through the silence, though she hadn't meant to speak aloud. "No, you know what you plan to say." The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Carter, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Her lawyer glanced back at her, eyes sharp with warning. But beneath the sternness, she saw something else, a flicker of doubt, not in her, but in Martinez. The chain of nods had slowed. The word hysterical no longer rolled as easily from tongue to tongue. A seed had been planted, watered by her defiance. Still, in the official record, the lie stood tall. The prosecutor closed his folder with a snap. "Your Honor, the state rests its case for today." The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Very well. Court will reconvene tomorrow." The gavel struck wood with a hollow thud. The sound reverberated through Olivia's chest like another plate shattering, another ring falling, another piece of her life swallowed by silence. She stood slowly, her knees weak but her eyes unyielding. Around her, whispers continued. She was hysterical. She was unstable. She lied. She staged it. Motifs repeated, louder in her head than in the room. Hysterical. 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 But beneath it all, one note rang clearer, scribbled by an anonymous hand in the back of the courtroom. Every lie here feels rehearsed. Second day of the hearing began with rain. Drops streaked the tall courthouse windows like slow tears, casting gray light across the benches. The air buzzed faintly with whispers, restless like static. Olivia Carter sat at the defense table, spine rigid, eyes trained on the wood grain before her. She no longer trembled. The first day had wrung every nerve raw, every scream into silence. Today, silence was her armor. The judge cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, you may speak on your own behalf." The room stirred. The gallery leaned forward, expecting another outburst, another breakdown to confirm the story told about her. Even the prosecutor's smirk suggested anticipation, like a hunter confident his prey would bolt straight into the trap. But Olivia did not bolt. She rose slowly, movements deliberate, as if each step carried its own weight of defiance. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, a rhythm that silenced the murmurs before she even spoke. She stood at the podium, adjusted the microphone, took one steady breath. When her voice came, it was not the high, frantic pitch they had painted for her. It was low, calm, clear. And because the courtroom microphones amplified every syllable, her composure filled the chamber louder than any shout. "I stand here not just as a woman called hysterical," she began, her words rolling with measured cadence, "but as a citizen with constitutional rights." The phrase landed like a gavel. Even the judge blinked, caught off guard by the formality of her tone. This was not a sobbing fiancé begging for mercy. This was something else. She continued, gaze steady on the bench. "Yesterday, this court heard repeated accusations, offered without evidence, that I was unstable, violent, dangerous. Such claims, if unchallenged, risk becoming the only narrative. But the Constitution protects me from trial by rumor. The Due Process Clause exists precisely for moments like this." Her lawyer glanced sideways at her, eyebrows raised. He hadn't scripted this. She wasn't reciting from notes. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is delivering a speech, not testimony." The judge hesitated, then waved a hand. "Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Carter. I'll allow it." Olivia nodded once, accepting the permission as if she had expected nothing less. "I request," she said, voice still calm, "a preservation order. Specifically, that all body camera footage from Officers Harris and Martinez on the night of June 12th be secured, unaltered, and presented to this court." The courtroom shifted again. The word body cam rippled through the benches like a pebble dropped into water. Some officers stiffened. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Olivia let the reaction settle before she spoke again. "If, as Officer Martinez testified, I was hysterical, screaming, breaking dishes, throwing objects, then those cameras would reflect that truth. If, as he claimed, I raised my hand to strike Officer Harris, then that evidence should vindicate him. The law does not fear evidence. Only lies fear preservation." Her voice did not rise, but the silence it carved made it feel thunderous. From the back of the room, the young clerk scribbled quickly, his pen trembling against the page. The words tumbled in jagged lines. "She speaks like she's the judge. Calm? Certain? Not hysterical at all." His fingers shook so badly that ink blotted the margin. The prosecutor pushed forward, attempting to recapture control. "Your Honor, the defense is grandstanding. The state has already established Officer Martinez's testimony." "There is no need." Olivia turned her gaze to him, sharp enough to cut. Her tone, however, remained even. "You mistake calm for weakness. But the law mistakes nothing." The phrase echoed through the courtroom. Even the judge's gavel froze midair, as if he too had been caught by its weight. Whispers flared from the gallery. One woman murmured, "She doesn't sound unstable." Another, more cynical, replied, "It's an act." But the balance had shifted. Doubt had entered the room, and doubt was contagious. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Miss Carter, you seem unusually versed in legal terminology. Do you have legal training?" Olivia allowed the corner of her mouth to twitch, half a smile, half a warning. "Let's just say, Your Honor, I know this system." The prosecutor pressed harder, sensing control slipping. "Miss Carter, are you suggesting sworn officers of the law fabricated testimony?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "I am suggesting that truth does not fear scrutiny. If their testimony is honest, the footage will confirm it. If it is not, well, the footage will speak louder than either of us." A ripple of discomfort passed through the officer seated behind the bar. That chain-knotting unity of the day before fractured into fidgeting hands and darting eyes. Olivia pressed on, her calmness now a blade. "The 14th Amendment guarantees that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That means this court has not only the authority, but the obligation to preserve evidence that could determine the truth of what happened. To deny that preservation is to deny due process itself." Her lawyer leaned back, watching her with something close to awe. He had not expected this. Neither had the prosecutor. Neither, it seemed, had the judge. The clerk's pen scratched again. She's citing the Constitution from memory. Who is she? His hand trembled so violently now that the letters blurred, but he couldn't stop. He felt as though he were recording history. The judge finally spoke, his voice low. Ms. Carter, your request will be considered. I admit, you have presented it with unusual clarity. Unusual clarity. The phrase itself was a concession. He had expected hysteria, tears, collapse. Instead, she had offered law, precision, restraint. Olivia inclined her head slightly. Clarity is all I have left, Your Honor. Lies cloud everything else. The prosecutor opened his mouth again, but his objection died on his tongue. He knew, as everyone knew, that the courtroom had shifted. The narrative of the hysterical woman no longer rang quite as cleanly. The audience had heard another voice now, quieter, sharper, undeniable. Olivia closed her folder, though it was empty. She didn't need papers. Every word lived in her spine, in her breath, in the steel she had carried into the room. And then she ended, her voice still level but carrying a charge that made even the fluorescent lights seem to hum. I know this system, she said, letting the words linger, because I, too, once wore the robe. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The clerk's pen dropped, clattering loudly against the wooden floor. The judge's eyes narrowed, confusion flickering into something else, something closer to unease. But Olivia said no more. She returned to her seat, the silence now hers to command. The third day of the hearing began with anticipation so thick it clung to the walls. The corridors of the courthouse buzzed like a hive. Rumors had already spread after Olivia's cryptic words the day before. I know this system because I, too, once wore the robe. Most dismissed it as bravado. Some whispered she might have once worked as a clerk or maybe a law professor. No one expected what actually unfolded. When the heavy oak doors swung open, silence fell as if sucked from the air. Olivia Carter entered, no longer in the muted dresses she had worn on the first 2 days, but draped in the unmistakable black robe of the federal judiciary. The robe was heavy, its fabric pooling around her shoulders like gravity itself. As she moved, the hem brushed against the polished wood floor with a low, steady whisper. Shh, 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 like the courthouse itself bowing in recognition. The fluorescent lights overhead caught the golden trim along the sleeve seams, threads glinting like thin chains of fire. Time seemed to slow. Even the bailiff's hand froze on the handle of the door he had just opened, as though unsure whether he should salute or kneel. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A junior attorney clutched his folder so tightly it crumpled. He whispered to the colleague beside him, voice breaking. She's Judge Olivia Carter, appointed to the federal court 2 years ago. The words shot across the benches faster than wildfire. Heads whipped, whispers collided, disbelief stacked upon disbelief until the chamber swelled with stunned noise. At the prosecution's table, Michael Harris's face drained of color. His jaw slackened, lips parting as if he had been punched without warning. For the first time since the hearing began, the officer who once towered in their kitchen now looked small. His badge, gleaming proudly on his chest, seemed suddenly ridiculous. Like costume jewelry in the presence of a crown. Beside him, Officer Michael Martinez shifted uneasily, throat bobbing with a hard swallow. He had rehearsed lies for a fiancée. He had not rehearsed for a judge. The presiding judge, an older man filling in temporarily, blinked twice. He glanced at Olivia, then at the robe, then at the murmuring audience. Slowly, with a dignity that masked confusion, he rose from his chair. There was no formal announcement. No gavel strike. He simply stepped aside, conceding the space not to the defense table, not to the witness stand, but to the figure who had just redefined the trial. The room seemed to breathe as one. Olivia moved forward. Each step echoed against the marble floor, louder than thunder. She ascended the steps to the bench. The robe shifted, fabric creasing with the soft sound of authority. When she placed her hand on the polished wood of the judge's desk, the golden trim on her sleeve caught the light, throwing a glint across the chamber like a flashbulb. Every eye rose with her. The entire gallery stood, not because the bailiff commanded it, but because instinct demanded it. They did not know whether to call her defendant or Your Honor. In that suspended moment, she was both, and something greater. A woman in the gallery whispered, awestruck, "She's not on trial. She is the trial." The phrase hung in the air like incense. Olivia's gaze swept across the courtroom. The prosecutor, once smirking, now stared at the floor as if words had abandoned him. Harris's chest heaved, sweat glistened at his temples. Martinez clenched his fists under the table, knuckles white, as if gripping the last fragments of a crumbling script. Olivia spoke, her voice resonant yet steady, amplified not by microphones but by authority. This robe is not costume. It is oath. It is responsibility. It is weight. She touched the fabric with her fingers, as though reminding herself of its burden. And I wear it not to intimidate, but to remind this court of something it has nearly forgotten. Justice belongs to no single story, no single badge, no single lie. Justice belongs to the truth. Her words fell heavy, striking each listener like stones dropped into deep water. The temporary judge, now standing to the side, bowed his head slightly. "The bench is yours, Judge Carter." Gasps again. Some scribes fumbled with pens, struggling to keep up. Reporters typed with frantic urgency. The young clerk in the back gripped his notepad so hard it bent. His notes scrawled in shaking ink. "She claimed the system yesterday. Today, she commands it. Seek." Olivia allowed the silence to stretch, the full force of the inversion settling like a storm cloud. Yesterday, they had branded her hysterical. Today, they realized they had been dissecting not just a woman, but a judge, one of their own, cloaked in authority higher than most in the room. She looked at Harris, who now sat stiff as a statue, pupils dilated with panic. "Officer Harris," she said evenly, "you once swore an oath to uphold the law without prejudice, without abuse of power. Yet here we are." He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His throat worked soundlessly, like a fish gasping on dry land. Martinez tried to speak instead, voice cracking. "Your Honor?" Her gaze cut to him, sharp enough to still his words. "Your testimony yesterday was rehearsed. Perfect cadence, perfect lie. But lies collapse under evidence. And evidence, gentlemen, does not blink." The gallery buzzed again, a mixture of fear, awe, and dawning exhilaration. The robe seemed to transform her, not into someone new, but into who she had always been, stripped of suppression. Yesterday, she had been painted as hysterical, unstable, dangerous. Today, draped in black and gold, she was none of those things. She was clarity incarnate. "Let the record reflect," Olivia declared, her voice echoing, "that I am Judge Olivia Carter of the United States District Court, and I will no longer be silent while the truth is buried under chains of false testimony." No one moved. Even the bailiff stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Then, slowly, applause began. It was hesitant at first. One hand clap from the gallery, then another, then a cascade like rain until the chamber thundered with it. Some wept, some shouted, "Justice!" Others simply stood stunned, as though they had witnessed the courtroom flip upside down. Harris lowered his head into his hands. Martinez sat rigid, eyes darting toward the exits like a man trapped. Olivia did not smile. The robe was too heavy for triumph. She simply stood taller, allowing the silence that followed the applause to become her ally. For the first time in 3 days, the trial no longer belonged to them. It belonged to her. And as the gallery whispered the phrase again, over and over, "She's not on trial. She is the trial." The weight of that truth settled into every stone of the courthouse. The 4th day of the hearing was different. No one whispered this time. No one leaned back in boredom, confident that the script had already been written. When Judge Olivia Carter entered robe-flowing, expression cold as iron, the gallery sat upright, hearts beating in collective anticipation. This was no longer a trial of a fiancé. It was the trial of 2 officers, of a system. Olivia adjusted the microphone on the bench, her fingers steady. "Today," she began, "we move beyond testimony. Today, we move to evidence." The words landed like the crack of a whip. She gestured to the bailiff. A technician wheeled in a cart bearing a monitor, cables already threaded into the courtroom's projection system. The screen flickered, static buzzing for a moment before the frozen image of a police body camera feed filled the room. The timestamp glowed faintly in the corner, June 12, 10:37 p.m. Olivia's voice carried calm authority. "Officer Martinez testified that I threw a bottle, that I raised my hand to strike Officer Harris. Let us see what his camera saw." The video rolled, grainy night vision, the cramped kitchen of Olivia's apartment, her figure trembling, voice high with fear, Harris looming in the doorway. "Pause," Olivia commanded. The technician froze the frame just as Harris's hand tightened around the mug. Zoom. The image enlarged, pixels breaking apart but detail undeniable. Harris's knuckles white against ceramic, Olivia's hands empty and pressed defensively against her chest. Murmurs swelled in the gallery. A reporter whispered, "That's not her hand. That's his. Play." The mug shattered against the floor. The microphone picked up Harris's voice, low and venomous. "You think you control me? You think you control anything? Now." Olivia leaned forward. "For the record, let it be noted that Officer Martinez swore under oath that I threw the object. The footage shows otherwise." Her gaze cut to Martinez, who sat frozen, his lips pressed so tight they nearly disappeared. Sweat darkened the collar of his uniform. "Every lie," Olivia said slowly, "has a timestamp, and every timestamp leads back to you." The clerk's pen scribbled furiously across the page, hand shaking so badly the ink bled into the margin. The gallery gasped again as Olivia signaled to the technician. Now, the second feed. Another video filled the screen, this one from the hallway camera outside Olivia's apartment. The angle was distant, but clear enough. Olivia standing in the doorway, crying, while Harris slammed the doorframe with his palm. Pause. Enhance. The image sharpened. Harris's mouth open mid-shout. Olivia, hands nowhere near him. Play. His voice rang out through the speakers. You're nothing without me. Nothing. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. A man muttered, Jesus. Olivia let the silence breathe before continuing. This is what the cameras caught. Now let us review what the system chose to forget. She gestured again. The monitor shifted from video to a digital slide. Numbers in stark white on black appeared, one after the other, as though marching forward like an indictment. THC 32 complaints filed against Officer Harris in 5 years. Poe, asked TEP 2. Japes filed against Officer Martinez. Actual disciplinary actions. Colleague, G0 terminations. Each number slammed into the room like a hammer strike. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, papers rustling in nervous hands. These are not accidents, Olivia said, voice steady but sharp. These are patterns. Patterns ignored. Patterns dismissed. Patterns allowed to metastasize into this very moment. Another slide. Dollar figures this time. 2.1 million paid in settlements linked to Harris's unit. The Bullbring Allers. 20 million linked to Martinez. The gallery erupted in whispers. Settlements? That's taxpayer money. Olivia let the murmur rise before cutting it off with a voice, amplified and unflinching. That is the price of silence. That is what happens when lies are fed and truth is starved. Martinez shifted in his chair, muttering under his breath. The microphone on the table, however, caught it. Crazy bitch, he hissed, forgetting the court was listening. The audio fed through the speakers, echoing across the chamber. A collective gasp erupted. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. The clerk's eyes went wide, hand trembling so violently that his notepad nearly slipped from his grasp. Olivia tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Thank you, Officer Martinez, for confirming your contempt in your own words. The court will preserve that recording as Exhibit C. Martinez's face flushed crimson. Harris buried his face in his hands. Olivia wasn't finished. Roll Exhibit D. The screen flickered again. This time, a leaked audio file, obtained through discovery. The voice, unmistakable. Martinez is bragging to another officer. We wrote it down clean. She'll look hysterical. He'll look calm. Easy win. The gallery exploded. Shouts, curses, gasps. The bailiff pounded the floor, calling for order. Olivia raised her hand, and silence obeyed. Every pixel, she said slowly, her voice cutting like glass, every frame, every decibel truth has been waiting. Her eyes swept across Harris, Martinez, the prosecutor, the gallery. And truth, she finished, is patient. The words seemed to reverberate through the walls, as if the courthouse itself had been waiting to hear them. Harris's forehead glistened with sweat. Beads rolled down his temples, dripping onto the table. His hands trembled. Martinez sat rigid, jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. The clerk wrote one final line, hands steady now, as if clarity itself had steadied him. The evidence is not hers. The evidence is ours. And it has spoken. The gallery rose to its feet, not in applause, not yet, but in stunned recognition. The lies that had filled the first 2 days lay shattered like glass on tile. And at the center of it all, Judge Olivia Carter stood draped in black and gold, the embodiment of patience rewarded, of truth unveiled. The courtroom smelled faintly of ozone, as though the electronics themselves sensed what was about to happen. The body cam footage had detonated like a bomb the day before. The gallery arrived this morning not to watch a trial but to witness an autopsy, of a system, of a culture, of a lie. Judge Olivia Carter sat straighter than ever behind the bench. The robe, heavy with authority, was no longer shocking. It was inevitable. She lifted her chin. Yesterday, this court heard what cameras recorded. But today, we must look not only at one night, we must look at the system that made that night possible. Her words slowed the air itself. Harris shrank in his seat. Martinez stared down at his hands. Even the prosecutor's pen stilled mid-note. This is not a personal flaw, Olivia said, her voice carrying to the rafters. She let the silence stretch, then delivered the cut. This is a design. The technician dimmed the lights at her signal. The monitor glowed. Black screen first, then stark white letters appeared as though carved into stone. 68% of use of force complaints in this county were dismissed without investigation. The number hung there, unblinking. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. One reporter whispered, 68%? Another corrected, that's nearly 7 out of 10. Olivia raised a hand. Dismissed, not examined, not reviewed, buried. The slide shifted. Another number appeared, larger, bolder. 22 million paid in silence over the last 7 years. The words burned like a billboard. That is $22 million, Olivia said evenly, taken from taxpayers, handed out quietly to settle claims, to silence victims, to bury truth. Every dollar a price tag on pain. Every dollar a receipt for injustice. Gasps. The clerk in the back fumbled his pen. It clattered to the floor, echoing louder than any gavel strike. He scrambled to catch it, then bent low over his pad, scrawling furiously. Today, the system itself is on trial. Olivia's gaze swept the room. She didn't just look at the gallery, she looked through it. Straight into the cameras lined against the wall, their red recording lights blinking like tiny, watchful eyes. "If you think this is just about me," she said, voice tightening into steel, "you're already complicit." The words shattered the invisible fourth wall. For a heartbeat, it felt less like she was addressing a courtroom and more like she was staring into living rooms, into phones, into the eyes of everyone watching. Some reporters leaned forward instinctively, as if she had spoken directly to them. A woman in the second row crossed herself. Harris dropped his gaze to the floor. Olivia gestured to the screen again. The slide changed, this time to a bar chart. Complaint categories stacked in grim silence. Excessive force, unlawful search, intimidation. Sieklam, Ekalebik, all tall, all red, all unresolved. "This county is not unique," Olivia continued. "It is a microcosm. Across this nation, complaint dismissal rates soar. Civil settlements mount, and officers who abuse power are shielded by silence. Silence from colleagues, silence from prosecutors, silence from those, too, afraid to challenge the uniform. Silence. Until a woman loses her voice in a kitchen and must scream into the void of the law itself." Her voice never cracked, but the room felt the weight as though she had shouted. The prosecutor rose, stammering. "Your Honor, this line of commentary exceeds the scope." Olivia's eyes flicked toward him. One look, and his words withered. She spoke over him, calm but devastating. "Scope ends where silence begins." And silence has ended today. The gallery erupted in applause, quickly silenced by the bailiff's bark of order. But the energy lingered, electric and uncontainable. Olivia turned back to the numbers. "We are told to treat each case as isolated, each officer as a bad apple. But apples rot because the barrel's neglected. This is not about one man's temper or another's testimony. This is structural. This is systemic. This is a design," her hand pressed against the robe at her chest. "And designs can be dismantled." The clerk wrote again, slower now, each letter etched with care. "She's not arguing for herself anymore. She's arguing for all of us." "See," Olivia straightened, drawing breath for the final blow. "Therefore, as a sitting judge of the United States District Court, I will formally request that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division open an investigation into this department, and I will urge them to impose a consent decree to bind this agency under federal oversight until the rot is cut out." The words detonated. Gasps filled the chamber. A man shouted, "About damn time!" Reporters bolted for the exits to file stories. Harris whispered something panicked to his attorney, who shook his head helplessly. Martinez slumped back, face pale as chalk. Olivia continued, voice unshaken. "A consent decree is not punishment. It is accountability. It is the law saying, you will not silence complaints. You will not bury truth. You will not treat lives as disposable line items on a budget ledger." She paused, eyes blazing under the lights, because every statistic is a person, every dollar is a wound, and every dismissal is a message that justice can wait. But justice cannot wait. Not anymore. For a long moment the room was silent. Then, slowly, the clerk put down his pen. He pressed his palms against the wood of his desk, as though steadying himself against the tidal wave of what he had just witnessed. The monitor still glowed, red numbers searing into every eye. 68% dismissed to 22 million paid in silence. The numbers no longer looked like data. They looked like gravestones. Olivia's voice softened, but only in volume. This is bigger than one woman, bigger than one courtroom. Today, the system itself is on trial, and the verdict will not be written in whispers, it will be written in action. The courtroom brimmed with anticipation, every breath held taut as though the entire chamber balanced on the edge of a knife. Judge Olivia Carter sat high on the bench, robe dark as midnight, golden trim catching slivers of light. In her palm, she held not the gavel but something smaller, colder, heavier with meaning, the simple gold band that had once symbolized a promise. Her gaze swept the room. She saw Harris trembling, sweat dripping from his brow. She saw Martinez clench his fists, his jaw tight with desperation. She saw the gallery survivors, reporters, strangers, every face tilted upward, eyes burning with need. They'd come for justice, and justice was ready to answer. Olivia's voice rose, resonant, filling every corner of the chamber. "You lied to control." The words landed like a lash. Harris's shoulders jerked. "You lied to silence." The gallery shivered. Martinez's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. "You lied to erase." The clerk's pen scratched across paper one last time, his hand steady now. Olivia's eyes sharpened, her voice striking the chamber like thunder. "But today, truth speaks louder." The gallery erupted with murmurs, then quieted instantly as she lifted her hand. She wasn't finished. This court finds Officer Michael Harris guilty of perjury, of falsifying testimony under oath, and of abuse of power against the very citizens he swore to protect. He is hereby stripped of his badge, his authority, and his honor. Harris slumped, as though the words had severed his spine. The badge on his chest suddenly looked like tarnished tin. Olivia turned to Martinez. This court finds Officer Michael Martinez complicit in falsified testimony, obstruction of justice, and professional misconduct. He is barred from law enforcement service and referred for federal prosecution. Martinez's jaw trembled. His hands twitched as though seeking something to hold, but found nothing. The prosecutor shifted in his chair, pale and speechless. The temporary judge who had once presided stood silently at the side, eyes lowered, as though humbled by the power reversal. And then came silence. Heavy, total, the kind of silence that stretched time itself. Olivia looked at the ring in her hand. Not the gavel, not the robe, but this small circle of gold, the first symbol of a life built on promises, shattered by lies. She held it high so the gallery could see. For a heartbeat, it glimmered under the fluorescent lights. Then she let it fall. Clang. The sound reverberated through the chamber, deeper and more final than any gavel strike. Gasps broke into sobs, sobs broke into cheers. The gallery surged to its feet, applause crashing like a wave. Some cried openly, others raised fists. The court dropped his pen, covering his face with trembling hands as tears slipped through his fingers. But Olivia did not smile. "Yeah." She spoke again, her tone grave yet luminous. Justice delayed as pain prolonged. The crowd hushed instantly, as though sacred words had entered the room. "Justice reclaimed," she continued, "is freedom reborn." Applause thundered again, rolling like a storm. She raised her hand once more, silencing them with a look that was both command and comfort. "When lies build walls," she said softly, her words slicing through the air like scripture, "truth becomes the hammer." The chamber shook with the sound of people rising, feet scraping wood, palms clapping, voices crying out. Reporters dashed for the exits, shouting headlines into phones. Survivors clung to one another. Even the bailiff, stone-faced all week, pressed a hand discreetly to his eyes. At the defense table, Harris crumpled forward, face buried in his arms. Martinez stared at the fallen ring, its metallic clang still echoing in his ears, as if it had been the toll of his own fate. Olivia stood tall, robe cascading around her like a mantle of night. She looked not triumphant, but resolute. The verdict was not victory. It was reclamation. She stepped back from the bench, the robe heavy, her shoulders straight. The applause followed her like thunder chasing lightning. And in the back of the courtroom, the clerk wrote one final line in his notebook. Today, the hammer fell, and the walls began to crack. The verdict did not end in silence. It spilled outward, a tidal wave that left nothing untouched. For Michael Harris, life became a series of locked doors. His badge was gone. His uniform, once worn like armor, was stripped from him and sealed in an evidence locker. When he applied for work, the word felon stamped across his record glared back at every employer. He knocked on doors, construction sites, warehouses, even grocery stores, but each time the screen flashed rejection. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street. The coffee shop where he had swaggered in uniform refused him service. His reflection in the mirror looked smaller, hollowed out. The bad-shaped shadow on his chest was permanent, but the authority it once held was gone forever. For Michael Martinez, disgrace was quieter but just as merciless. His name appeared in headlines, tied forever to corruption and lies. Apartment applications vanished once landlords saw the background check. The phone stopped ringing. Colleagues, those who had once nodded in chain-like unison, looked through him as though he were invisible. He lived in borrowed rooms, blinds drawn, surviving on canned soup and silence. The words he had muttered in arrogance, "crazy bitch," played on loop in news reports, echoing louder than any defense he could offer. Reputation gone, future erased, he became a ghost in the city he once patrolled. Olivia Carter, meanwhile, emerged from the fire not unscathed but transformed. The community did not call her victim nor survivor. They called her the judge who judged back. The murals appeared on brick walls downtown, her profile painted in black and gold, the words, "Truth is patient," scrawled beneath. Students carried signs quoting her, "When lies build walls, truth becomes the hammer." Survivors of abuse sent her letters, some handwritten on lined paper, others typed and printed with shaking hands. "You gave us a voice. You showed us silence isn't forever." Pratchett followed her, but she did not bask. She returned to the bench, robe heavier than ever, each case another reminder that justice was not an event but a responsibility. Yet her trial rippled farther than even she imagined. One ripple reached a man named Samuel Brooks. He had spent 20 years in prison for a crime he swore he hadn't committed. His appeals had been denied, his protests dismissed as delusion. But after Olivia's case exposed systemic rot, civil rights attorneys reopened his file. Buried evidence surfaced. Samuel walked free, gray streaking his beard, chains replaced by sunlight. On the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed him. He held up the morning paper. On its front page was a photo of Olivia in her robe, hand raised, eyes burning. Samuel smiled, tears streaking his cheeks. "She gave me my life back," he whispered. Another ripple touched the young clerk who had scribbled frantic notes during the trial. He remembered his pen slipping from his hand when Olivia declared, "This is a design." He remembered writing, "Today, the system itself is on trial." Seek. Those words haunted him, in lectures, in dreams, in the quiet moments before dawn. Months later, he submitted his law school application. Under intended field of study, he wrote, "Civil rights law." His essay began with 7 words. "I was there when truth took the stand." And the courthouse itself bore the final ripple. The county council voted unanimously to rename it. The old brass letters, dull and bureaucratic, were replaced by new ones, gleaming under the sun, "The Hall of Truth and Consequence." On the front steps, a plaque was mounted, polished until its words could be read from the street. "Actions have consequences." Visitors paused to touch the plaque, fingers brushing against the letters as though drawing strength from its weight. Survivors of injustice came to the steps just to stand there, breathing in the reminder that their pain was not invisible. Inside, Olivia walked the halls, her heels clicking softly against marble. The echoes no longer sounded lonely. They sounded like memory, like warning, like promise. Harris drifted through the city's edges, jobless, nameless, his crimes burned into digital eternity. Martinez became a recluse, his disgrace a brand no curtain could hide. But Olivia's name became synonymous with reclamation. Not triumph, not victory. Reclamation. Because justice, she had said, is not something given. It is something reclaimed, brick by brick, truth by truth, until the walls lies built are nothing but rubble. And so the world moved forward, but with a new marker etched into its map. A hall renamed, a community awakened, a judge remembered not just for her robe but for the clang of a ring striking wood. The courthouse steps burned under the white-hot glare of cameras. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks, each burst freezing Judge Olivia Carter mid-stride, her black robe flowing behind her like a banner. Reporters shouted her name, microphones thrust forward like spears, but she did not flinch. She stopped at the podium, the brass plaque of the newly christened Hall of Truth and Consequence gleaming behind her. The crowd surged forward, anticipation thick enough to choke the night air. Her eyes swept the sea of faces, then locked onto the single red dot of a camera's recording light. And then, as if the rest of the world ceased to exist, she spoke directly into it. "Silence only feeds injustice." The crowd hushed. "Lies kill faster than fists. Share this story so no woman ever loses her future to control again." Flashbulbs exploded, but Olivia did not blink. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade through fog. She paused, letting the words hang. Then she leaned forward, her gaze piercing the lens as though staring into every living room, every phone screen, every hidden corner where someone sat afraid. "If you're watching this," she said, softer but sharper, "maybe you're the one who was silenced. Maybe you're the child who lost. Maybe you're the parent who left. Hear me. Justice can be reclaimed. Share it." A murmur rolled through the crowd, reporters scribbling, survivors weeping, strangers standing taller. Olivia lifted the small gold ring that had once promised forever. For a moment, it glittered in her palm under the lights. She closed her fist around it. "Actions have consequences," she said, her voice a steady drumbeat. She opened her hand, and the ring dropped against the podium with a metallic clang that silenced the night. And tonight, consequence finally caught up. The crowd erupted, applause, shouts, sobs. Some raised fists, others simply wept. Chloe, her longtime friend and attorney, stepped beside her and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Her voice, clear and unwavering, carried above the din. "Tonight," Chloe said, "justice wasn't served. It was reclaimed." The words cracked the crowd open. Survivors cheered. Reporters lifted cameras higher. The chant began low, then swelled until it filled the night. "Truth, truth, truth, truth." Olivia closed her eyes for just a moment, breathing it in. The chant, the flash, the echo of justice alive in human throats. She knew this moment wasn't hers alone. It belonged to every silenced voice, every hidden bruise, every story buried under official reports stamped dismissed. She looked into the camera one last time, breaking the fourth wall with all the force of someone who had lived the lie and shattered it. "If you think this is only my story, you are already complicit. Share it, so those who have been silenced can finally be seen." Behind her, the plaque gleamed in the night. Actions have consequences, and for the first time, the world seemed ready to listen.